Welcome to What's Your Forte, presented by Bandology.
Welcome to the 8th episode of What's Your Forte, presented by Bandology, the show where we interview professional musicians, conductors, composers, and educators about their musical journeys and the experiences that brought them to where they are today. On today's episode, we have Francis Smith, the newly appointed musical director of the Burlington Teen Tour Band, Canada's oldest and largest youth marching band. He holds a Bachelor of Music in Performance from the University of Toronto and a Bachelor of Education from Nipissing University. Francis has taught instrumental music at both elementary and secondary levels with the Halton District School Board since 2015. Francis' involvement with the Burlington Teen Tour Band began when he joined the Junior Redcoats in 1994. He moved up into the ranks of the Burlington Teen Tour Band in the spring of 1995. After a few years, he was promoted to section leader and then one of the band's drum majors, a position he maintained until his retirement as a band member in 2005. Then in 2007, Francis joined the Teen Tour Band's instructional staff in the role of woodwind instructor. At the end of 2018, following the retirement of Sir William Hughes, he was appointed the position of interim musical director. In March of 2020, Francis was formally named as the band's new musical director and associate director of bands and music services for the City of Burlington's Recreation Services Department. Without further ado, let's jump into this week's episode and learn more about Francis' musical journey and the experiences that brought him to where he is today. So welcome to What's Your Forte. Can you briefly describe yourself and your current positions?
Absolutely. My name is Francis Smith. I am a saxophone player. I'm a teacher with the Halton District School Board. And more recently, I've been named as the Associate Director of Bands and Music Services for the City of Burlington. Within that role, I am the Musical Director of the Burlington Teen Tour Band.
Awesome. So can you bring us back to the beginning of your musical journey? What drew you to your first instrument? Was it the saxophone or was it another instrument? Things like that?
Yeah, my first instrument wasn't the saxophone. It was actually the violin. It didn't last very long. My sisters were taking violin lessons. I think I was about 4 years old, 3 or 4 years old. And that lasted a couple of years. And then I moved actually into the piano, which seems to be a logical step for a lot of people. I didn't come to the saxophone until I was in grade 6, when at elementary school we had to pick band instruments. But I didn't actually start on the saxophone there either, because a lot of the music programs around here at elementary school is when you're picking band instruments, you'll pick your top 3. You know, there'll be like a demonstration. My teacher said, fill out this form with your top 3 picks for instruments. So number 1 was drums. Number 2 was the saxophone. And number 3 was the clarinet. And then I got the clarinet. So I had a clarinet at home that my sister played. So I was able to start in the elementary school program playing clarinet, and I played in the school band. But my dad knew that I really wanted to play the saxophone, so he got me a saxophone. So I started taking saxophone lessons then. I feel now really fortunate to have played the clarinet and saxophone at the same time. It helped me bridge some of the frustrations between playing the 2 instruments later or picking up a clarinet later, because they're as much as they're both woodwind instruments, they're different beasts, right? But that's it. So that's when I started on the saxophone when I was in grade 6 as well. So I was about 11 years old.
So then you continued playing the saxophone. So what brought you kind of like through until it was time to study it post-secondarily?
The Junior Redcoats and the Burlington Teen Tour Band are a very large part of the culture and community of Burlington. And I had a very close friend who lived 2 doors down. His name's Tim Hart. He was also a clarinet player. And he was joining the Junior Redcoats, and he said, why don't you come do this too? Like, you know, you can play your saxophone in the juniors. And at that point, I'd only seen them in a parade here and there or heard of them briefly. So I went up to the first rehearsal, and that's kind of when I got hooked. So 11 years old, joining the Junior Redcoats, and then making my way into the Teen Tour Band when I turned 13 as a saxophone player. I spent 10 years in the band, actually. So I was a saxophone player for 5 years, and then I was promoted to drum major, which is essentially the top position you can be as a member of the ensemble, where you are conducting the ensemble, you are leading the ensemble on parade. Basically, you're one of the ones that's in charge of the unit on parade and in performance. So that was a total honor and just a really amazing place to be, because that was the introduction to some conducting, where I got to learn how to shape some music and just have, instead of just performing it, I got to mentor with Sir William Hughes, who was the musical director of the band for 20 years, who I just replaced when he retired. And that was an amazing experience, getting to work with somebody like him, because he was a member of the Royal Marines as a principal piccolo player for a period of time. He worked on a number of different film scores and things. So he was always really approachable and very supportive. So I think in a way, working with Bill really sparked an interest of conducting and working with ensembles for me. Music is one of those things that I think it chooses you. You can be like, yeah, I'm going to go study music, right? But if it's one of those things where you just can't, you just won't leave you alone, right? You've got this itch and you're like, I just want to play. I want to be part of this. I want to create experiences with people. I want to, something you can't walk away from. I think that's when it's okay. Let's take this to another level. So that led me actually right after high school to a brief stint at Humber College in the jazz program. And then I walked away for a short while and then decided that's, after working some odd jobs here and there, I'm like, I want to finish this up. So then I ended up at the University of Toronto, where I finished my jazz performance degree and studied arranging orchestration with Taylor Promain, which was an amazing experience. I had some pretty world-class instructors at U of T. And then it was one of the instructors from one of the ensembles I was in, Gordon Foote, asked me if I had ever considered education. And up to that point, it really wasn't something that I had been thinking about, but I started looking into it more and then made it to study at Nipissing University up in North Bay, like beautiful North Bay. And that was great. And the rest is history somewhat.
So then what brought you to your first teaching position and getting more into a higher leadership position within the Burlington Teen Tour Band?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's my first teaching position. It's kind of a funny story. I'm a really big Stevie Wonder fan, and Stevie Wonder was in Toronto, and he was touring his Songs in the Key of Life record. And so I bought a ticket, went to see him, and I ran into an old friend that I hadn't seen for almost 10 years. His name's Brian Vincent. He's the head of music at T.A. Blakelock High School. And I met Brian when I was working at the Merriam School of Music in Oakville in the sales department. And his wife, Carlene, was one of the teachers there. So he would come in and rent some equipment, and he was teaching at Abbey Lane Public School and in Oakville for a while. And, we hit it off and chat. And anyway, it had been years since I had a chance to see him. And then I ran into him at this concert at the door. And he said, "What are you up to?" I'm like, "Well, I just graduated from Nipissing with my Bachelor of Education, and I'm going to start looking for jobs." And this was probably in September of that year. He said, "Well, there might be something coming up soon, Blakelock, that you should apply for." So he just gave me a heads up that this opportunity was coming. So I applied for the job, had the interviews, and that was it. I ended up with my first long-term occasional position in high school at Blakelock for the year. That was a learning experience on itself, because there's just an amazing music program and culture at Blakelock. To be able to get in there, I ran the two jazz bands, the junior jazz band and the senior jazz band, which we called the Blakelock Jazz Orchestra. That was it. That was my first experience. And then from there, I moved into the elementary role. So I've taught for the past 4 or 5 years at the elementary school level as well. I left the Teen Tour Band in 2005 as a drum major. And a few years later, I was invited to become part of the instructional staff, focusing on the woodwinds. So mostly clarinets and saxophones. In that role, I would run sectionals. I would be there to support Bill Hughes and Rob Bennett, who are the musical director and the managing director, and just work to help build the musicality of the woodwind sections. Sir William Hughes decided to retire from the band end of 2018. Initially, it was something that I stepped into as the interim musical director. So after he retired, they needed somebody to fill that spot until they could find somebody. I jumped into that role, and it was amazing. It was really openly accepted, which is great. It took a little while to get to me accepting a full-time position there, because we were touring to France. The band was traveling to Normandy, France for the D-Day celebrations. Just was such a busy time. It wasn't until at the end of 2019 when the position was posted and interviews took place. So I went through that process and did the interviews and decided that working with this ensemble of just remarkable youth of our city in Burlington, that was an really important part of my life. Here we are. I have the position now, which is amazing.
So I want to get into a little bit like the role of a woodwind instructor. Was there a role for each group of the ensemble?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have instructors or several instructors for different subsection of the band. 3 color guard instructors, a flute instructor because our flute section can be fairly large at times, up to 40 people. Then I was in charge of the clarinets and the saxophones, and then there's a brass instructor, and then several drumline instructors. So there's currently 3 different drumline instructors that work with our drumline as well. And then there's the musical director, and then the managing director of the ensemble who overlooks everything from the day-to-day operation of the ensemble to the marching instruction, basically the guy with the seal of approval of what we do. And that's Rob Bennett.
It's super cool that there's a lot of leadership that goes into it.
Yeah, there is. That's just the instructional staff for music and marching, also marching instructors. And then there's a huge behind the scenes uniform team, hats. There's the people who manage our equipment and drive our equipment truck around. When you're moving a band of 180 to 200 kids around all over the world, it takes a lot of people to make it happen, right? And then a ton of incredible volunteers from our booster organization that make sure things run smoothly behind the scenes as well.
So 180, that's a lot. So I know that Burlington Teen Tour Band is Canada's largest and oldest youth marching band.
Yeah, largest and oldest youth marching band. It's been around since 1947. It was originally started as the Burlington Boys and Girls Band, and then became the Burlington Teens Tour Band, and eventually that S was dropped to be the Burlington Teen Tour Band. So over that course, there's been 4 different music directors, and I've been the 5th now. So that's a really big honor to have something that had so much longevity. We're coming up on our 75th anniversary in a couple of years. Really looking forward to filling that 5th director seat for the next little while. Anyway.
That's amazing. How typical is that of another Canadian marching group? Like, I'm not sure what the rest of the Canadian marching scene looks like, but is it similar to the Burlington Teen Tour Band?
I would say that the Teen Tour is unique, certainly in Ontario now. A while ago, if you're looking at the 60s and 70s, there were many marching bands around and many drum corps around. Those have disappeared or disbanded over time. There's still lots of little marching bands or police bands, pipe bands, or small drum corps that are around here. But as far as Ontario goes, Teen Tour is definitely the largest unit on parade around here. If you look out west, the Calgary Stampede organization has a number of bands that they work with, like the Stampede Show Band is a large band that is really featured during the Stampede, and then they do some work outside of that as well. There's the Stetson Band. There's a lot going on in Alberta, it seems. But as far as large marching bands, it's not like the States where every high school has a 200-piece marching band. And that's a bit of a stretch to say that too. But marching band is a big deal in the United States. When we tour down to the United States, it's fun because people really appreciate marching bands and drum corps there. They don't here. It's just, there's just that culture of marching bands and marching music in the States that's alive and well.
Right. So you mentioned Bill Hughes and Brian Vincent and Gordon Foote. So there's some of the influence and mentors that you've had in your life. Are there any other ones that you can mention that really influenced you in your career or in your education?
I have to talk about my very first piano teacher when I was 5 years old. Her name was Phyllis Hawkins. She was just an amazing woman. Okay, so I took piano lessons with her for 8 or 9 years, maybe almost 10 years, actually. And at one point, I must have been 10 years old. And I looked at her, as young people do, and said, "How old are you?" And she said to me, "I am the keys of the piano plus 1." And I had to go home and figure that out. But this lady she had been Citizen of the Year in Burlington. She was still teaching swimming lessons at the YMCA, and she was in her early 90s. She just had this joy and spark of music. It made things really, really fun. So I think that's kind of where the journey started. I've been very fortunate to have some incredible teachers. My 2 high school teachers at Nelson High School in Burlington were Jim Heaslip and Al Eady. They really got the ball rolling for me as well there. And I actually play in a band right now with Jim Heaslip. He runs this band called the 12 for Swing. We do a Frank Sinatra and a Bobby Darin tribute show. That's a lot of fun. Then Kelly Jefferson just is one of the most amazing human beings on the planet. So not only is he a monster musician, but he's just a joy to work with and to talk to, and just an inspirational, understanding guy. Terry Promain at U of T is also wonderful. Just having a chance to work one-on-one with him in an arranging session is amazing. So when I was at U of T and I studied arranging with Terry, it was a private lesson essentially, like a 1-hour lesson with him every week in my 4th year there, and that was invaluable. I've had Pat Collins, that's a great bassist. I can go on and on and on. It's been so fortunate to meet all these amazing people that you take a little bit from all the way. And I've already mentioned Bill Hughes being an influence into getting me into conducting or working with an ensemble. As far as influences go, as a saxophone player, the first thing that really kind of got me interested in the saxophone was Charlie Parker. Up until that point, I'd heard some marching band music, like old marches by Alfred or Sousa and things, and I thought that was pretty neat. But something got me fired up that really changed my idea of what music sounded like was the first time I heard a recording of Confirmation. 11 years old, I'm like, what is that? That's incredible. And from there, that sort of blew my ears open to the whole jazz thing. So then from there it was, okay, Jackie McLean, John Coltrane, Phil Woods, Dick Oates. It was a really big one, who's a lead alto player with the Village Vanguard Jazz Orchestra. It goes on and on and on. Those guys really, really got me interested in pursuing more saxophone playing.
So we've reached the halfway point, the Fast 5 rapid round. 5 quick questions. First thing that comes to your head is the answer. All right, so you ready?
Yep.
All right, number 1, favorite concert you attended?
Oh, favorite concert I've attended. Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life.
You already a little bit mentioned this, but musical inspiration growing up.
I used to listen to a lot of punk rock and ska.
I didn't know that.
For sure. That's big.
And number 3 is a favorite movie soundtrack.
Oh, Star Wars.
That's good. And the 4th one is an instrument that you wish you played.
The cello.
The 5th one is hidden talent.
Hidden talent. I, for briefly in high school, did some school tours as a yo-yo show, as part of a yo-yo act. So yo-yos got really big again when I was in high school, and me and a buddy of mine would tour elementary schools and put on a show and talk about the history of yo-yos. And then we had music background, and then we sign autographs. It was super fun. So I haven't touched one in a couple of years, but I used to be okay with the yo-yo.
Bandology is a proud Canadian nonprofit dedicated to more music for more kids via education, collaboration, and community. Find out more at bandology.ca.
So the next one is, what's been the highlight of your career so far?
Certainly a highlight has been being named the 5th director of music for the Burlington Teen Tour Band. That is just a huge honor for me, and something that I take very seriously, because it is such an important part of our musical culture in Burlington, and it's affected thousands of people's lives over the nearly 75 years it's been around. So that is definitely a highlight. Like I said, a total honor to be a part of that. Other musical highlights, well, performing with the band for the D-Day remembrance ceremonies, June Beach, France, as the musical director of the ensemble. It was something that I did as well as a band member back in 2004 as well. Being able to bookend it that way was pretty amazing. Being able to work with amazing young minds every day to create music, that's the best thing ever. I get to go make music with these incredible young musicians every single day, and I'm glad that I get to do that. I think it's such a privilege to be able to work with kids learning music and to just see how proud they are of their work when they get to present it to people. So that's a highlight too.
That's amazing. That kind of goes into the next question pretty well. It's, why is music education important to you?
I think, studying music is not necessarily about learning how to play the clarinet, right? It's so much more than that. You get to learn how to be a person, because now you're working with developing your collaboration skills, your listening skills, or learning kind of like a truly human thing. Right? I think music education is important to me, not because we want people to study music and be everyone to be a professional musician, but because they get to create something on their own. It could be spontaneously or with other people, to reach something beautiful every day. That's why it's important, because you get in touch with so many more human qualities than if you weren't experiencing that. I think that's what it is. I think music education for me is important because it makes you just more human. And I think I wish I had a more sophisticated answer for you, but I think that's it. It can be a release for people. Music means different things to everybody, and how it affects you can be really, really profound. But it's you just learn so much about yourself when you learn how to play an instrument. You're learning so many things, like how to deal with adversity. When things get tough, you're able to push through it that much more I feel if you've worked hard at developing a skill set for something else. Because like learning the saxophone, there's so many walls you run into all the time. By working through it and getting to the next level, you learn how to deal with that. And I think that's one of the really great things about it, right? It just teaches you to have perseverance to attain something. And in this case, playing an instrument is a pretty beautiful thing.
I couldn't agree more. You work with a lot of young musicians. You have a lot of young musicians in your life. So the next question is, do you have any advice for young musicians?
Yeah. Keep the time for music. Regardless if music is going to be a path that you'd like to pursue, there's always room for it in your life. Stretch out, try new things, pick up different instruments, play music with other people. Open your ears to all the music that you can, because you'd be so surprised at what you might be attracted to musically down the road. Because sometimes we get very narrow-minded, maybe in some choices that we listen to, but there's incredible music out there from all over the world and incredible collaborations that are happening. And that's how the art form grows, right? The other thing I would say is make time to listen actively to your favorite music. So not just surface listening. It's easy to put some, earbuds in and walk down the street and you'll have, some of your favorite music on you're listening to. But take the time to sit with the music, reach in with your ears and see what you can get out of it. Because there's often some really incredible, subtle things that are going on in that you don't know about. I remember the first time I really had one of those experiences was listening to the Star Wars soundtrack and listening to the main theme and hearing the harp in the background. And I must have listened to, how iconic is the main theme from Star Wars. But there's a harp in there. And one day I was just sitting with it listening and I'm like, oh my goodness. So then I started doing it with other things. Like active listening is such an important thing, right? And then, taking like a Motown recording and listening deep into that and hearing everything that's going on there. Yeah, like the music makes people dance, but there's a lot going on. I think not just being, I don't like that. Well, why don't you like it? And music's a really great thing to do that with because there's so much right out there. You could really get into it and be like, and then find out what you identify with. Going to open up like this musical journey that you never knew existed. Listen actively, make time to make music with other people. And if you are studying it, remind yourself why you love it. Because sometimes when you're studying it at a higher level, it gets easy to get a little down on yourself. But take the time to think back, play stuff that you really love in order to remind yourself why you love it so much. Because it's there.
That's some great advice. I really like that. It actually brings us to our last question. Do you have any exciting plans or new projects coming up?
Well, right now I'm working on moving into the Associate Director of Music Services role with the City of Burlington. So that officially starts in September. And so I'm going through the process now of learning some of the behind the scenes things that I'll be doing that aren't Teen Tour Band related, because it's not just the Burlington Teen Tour Band I'm working with. I'm also overseeing some of the operation of the Junior Redcoats. I'll be working with the planning music lessons and Music in the Park series events and other music related things within the city of Burlington as well. There's a bit of a transition there that I'm going through in terms of learning the software systems or learning the role. There's that. Right now, things being what it is with COVID, we're just starting to fire up rehearsals again with Teen Tour. So we've had these small rehearsals where we've brought out members of the woodwinds or the brass or the drumline or the color guard on different nights, and they're spread socially distant throughout the park and sometimes in several different sections. So they're really excited to get back and play some music together. And then as restrictions get lifted, by the time this thing airs, we'll probably be able to have 100 people together out in the park. So if you were to take a trip down to the Central Park in the city of Burlington, you can see all these big circles for distancing, but it's been really great to hear music in the park again. So we're working on getting the band up and running. We've done some virtual bands where people record themselves and we piece them together. We've done a few of those over the shutdown, but beyond that, we're just, as things get lifted and as we're able to get back together, we're playing more and more events for the band. Excited to just get started in this role full time in September.
That's amazing. Well, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, find out more about Burlington Teen Tour Band or the different musical things that are happening within the city of Burlington, where can they go?
They can check out the band's website at teentourband.org or email me at francis.smith@burlington.ca. That'd be a great place to start. There's also Teen Tour is also on the socials, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter.
Amazing. Alrighty. So I'm just going to thank you again for taking the time to chat and share your experiences and the different insights and wisdom that you have from your experiences in music.
Oh, thanks, Megan. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for asking me to be a part of this series. It's great. Thank you very much.
A big thank you again to Francis Smith for being on What's Your Forte. If you want to stay up to date on all What's Your Forte episodes, you can either follow us on your favorite podcasting platform or subscribe to us on YouTube. Once again, I'm your host, Megan Harden, and I'll see you next time.
for joining us on What's Your Forte, presented by Bandology. If you liked what you heard, you can find out more about this series and our organization at bandology.ca, which features information about research, advocacy, and music education, and our band camp and play a gig programs. Follow us on social media for more videos and performances on Instagram and Facebook.